Welcome to the Northeast Divide podcast. I'm your host, John Lane. And as always, I'm joined by Anth as we discuss the two largest football clubs in the Northeast, Newcastle United and Sunderland. Very quick notice, of course, we are sponsored by Mama Lane Crofts. So if you mention Northeast Divide when you're making your order, you'll get 10% off your first order. They're also running a competition at the moment where you can design your own cup, which you could win. So very exciting times for them. So do check it out. They're on Facebook and Instagram, and we will post the links below as we always do. And thanks for joining us as always. So we've got an episode with a bit of a difference. We are still in the close season, so we are fudging material together to get us through to the new year. And we wanted to talk about our favourite Newcastle and Sunderland 11s. So I'll ask you to go away, have a think about what your 11 would be. Give me your all-time Sunderland goalkeeper.
All-time Sunderland goalkeeper. Yes. Hello, John. It was a tough one. Obviously, I've gone for sort of more recent times of such, but it was a bit of a quandary. But yeah, he played for us from 1998 to 2003. Made 171 appearances. I think that was just league. He cost us £500,000. And it's the flying Danish keeper, Mr. Thomas Sorensen, for obvious reasons, because obviously we had to include that they played in a derby game. And yeah, he did ever so well because he replaced a cult hero in Lionel Perez when he came. And, you know, he came and won promotion in 1999, and he kept 29 clean sheets in the process. And, you know, obviously what he did at St. James's Park, that's a wonderful, wonderful evening. It'll always go down in Sunderland folklore.
It's a bloody horrible evening that was. Have I told you the Lionel Perez legend story? I don't know, like if
Go on
I've
then.
told you this. So there's a rumor, right? And again, like I'm not gonna kind of put anything to this, and I'm not sure if I've mentioned this on this podcast that Newcastle wanted to sign Robert Pires. Dalglish really liked him, had scouted him, and he was at Metz at the time. And he said, it's basically everyone had gone on holiday, and he said to the secretary, I need you to sign Perez. And he left, and he came back from holiday and would signed Lionel Perez instead. And that's the rumor. That's the reason why we end up signing him. And if you think that, yeah, we had like 4
Oh my
goalkeepers,
word.
and he didn't
Brilliant.
play any time at all. So when you then add those two things together, you think possibly. As soon as you said the years, I knew it was Tom Somerson that you were talking about, and I kind of in my head thought that might be who you went for. So obviously big moment at the Gallagher, of course, but you know I think he was fairly solid until he left. Did he go to Villa from
He
when he
did.
left?
He went Aston
Yeah,
Villa.
yeah,
Yes, he did indeed.
yeah, yeah. No, that's
But
it.
yeah, anyway, yeah, he was a great keeper. He was very consistent, good distribution, good goal stopping technique, and obviously he proved that with that penalty save. So yeah. Anyway, on to you, John, if you want. Yeah.
Yeah, so I've gone for another. I haven't gone for Lionel Perez. It might shock you to learn, but I have gone for a goalkeeper that played for both Newcastle and Sunderland.
Mm.
An
Yeah.
Irish goalkeeper that
Yeah.
we signed in the summer of '97, I believe, after he'd spent 6 months on loan at the Stay Light, and that is Shay Given. So I think Shay Given epitomised kind of. He joined the club at the right time. We'd just kind of finished second for the second year in a row. We were going to play in the Champions League. And he was brought into a situation where basically Cernacek and Hislop were very much the two vying for the jersey, and he was given the number 1 jersey straight away. So massive responsibility for him to take on. And he wore that shirt, and and then he had Steve Harper behind him for a long time, trying to kind of usurp him. And anytime Harper looked like he had a sniff, Given just upped at a level and kept that away from him. And yeah, great keeper for us. And I think what epitomised kind of his time is the fact that really, he was it was a bit of a roller coaster. As Newcastle can be, yeah, we got back to the Champions League in the mid noughties, but obviously from about 2007, 2008, there was a bit of a decline going on. When Man City came in for him in the January of 2009, I think he'd had enough. There was a game that we played Liverpool at St James's Park, and I think we lost 5-0. And it's one of the best goalkeeping performances I've ever seen, despite that. You know, it, I can't say he was unstoppable because he conceded 5, but you know, like he couldn't have done more than he did in that game. And I think that was the game when people thought if he's going to go, then you can totally understand why he's making that decision. And in some quarters, he still gets a bit of stick for leaving at that stage. But I think we have to remember the kind of club that Newcastle was at that time. Mike Ashley had made a decision to sell him to get the 6 million quid or whatever paltry amount it was for him. And that, you know, Steve Harper would do a job. And Steve Harper did do a job, and that's not the reason why we went down that year. But yeah, you look back and you think you can totally understand why, from his perspective, he made that decision.
Great goalkeeper. Great goalkeeper. We were. I think a lot of the support players were gutted that we couldn't keep him, but he came on loan, and I mean, he pulled off however many clean sheets in a row, and he was only a young lad. But when you look at obviously the likes of Harper, who was at Newcastle, obviously Shaka Hislop, etc. I mean, these were keepers who were well established and good, solid goalkeepers. So he had to be consistent, but he was more than consistent. When he was outstanding, his shot stopping was just he was cat-like at times, wasn't he? Absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
So yeah, shake it. I mean, he's still loved by our support base as well. So yeah, I can fully understand that decision. So great player, great goalkeeper.
Absolutely. Right. Anth, what formation are you going for?
Well, I've got. Do you know what? I haven't really thought about it, to be fair. I've got a
You just
wing
picked
back.
your
I've,
11, your
yeah,
11
I've just
favorite players.
I've just gone for it basically. Yeah, I've got a wing back, and I've got two in midfield who could play wing or sort of wing back, I suppose. But yeah, I never quite thought about that, John. But I can go ahead with me next choice if you want, and then I can work it out
Go
from
for
there.
it. Yeah, yeah, we'll work it out as we go. That's fine.
So I were going left back. I were going
Yeah,
right back. Oh
left back
yeah.
works.
So
Yeah, yeah.
left back, wing back. Do you know what? He's one of our own. He came from Argentina. He's a Mackham now, regardless of the fact he played for Borough. You know, we didn't mind that. And obviously, he went on to do some good things at South Shields as a player and a manager. So Julio Arca, what a player! 3.5 million at the time. I think 157 appearances, 17 goals. I think these are just league appearances, by the way. But he was just absolutely incredible. He could tackle. He was tough in the tackle. He was skillful. He could get up and down the wing. He was just tremendous. He was absolutely tremendous, and the supporters took to him straight away. I mean, I think Newcastle and Leeds were interested in him, and what happened was I think we'd watched him in an under 21 match against England, and we were first in basically. And I tell you what, we did ever so well because some of our signings sort of in or around that time who were Argentinian, Nicholas Medina, etc., who cost a fair few quid, didn't quite work out, but Julio did. And I tell you what, I met him once. And it was after we'd been promoted, after we'd beat Luton. Was it 5-0 down at Kenilworth Road, or was it 6-0 anyway? Keno, etc. And he was in Sunderland City Centre, and he was getting mobbed. And I tell you what a lovely, amiable, approachable fella. I had a good chat with him. I was absolutely steaming and he entertained us for a little bit. So yeah, I know there's the obviously the footage of him when he went away with the Sunderland support, and he got sort of cajoled into doing a chant about Shearer, but I think it was half-hearted, half-arsed, but I think everyone would appreciate him in Northeast football for the player that he was, and you know what, and a lovely fellow as well. Julio Arca, brilliant, brilliant.
I mean, in fairness, he's singing an anti-Newcastle song as a Sunderland player. Like, it's not like Lee Clark wearing an anti-Sunderland T-shirt as a Sunderland player.
Yeah,
So, I think, it's a different level, and really can't criticise them for
yeah.
getting on board with your support, regardless, of what I think of that song in particular. So I'm kind of going. I think I'm going 4-2-3-1. That's kind of
Right.
where I'm going. And so flat back four. And I'm gonna go with Jose Enrique. Now I've tried to pick players like I've said. It says all time on the title, right? And I know that because of that, I will get some stick for picking Jose Enrique. But I think of the left backs that I've seen in my time, I think he's technically the best one that I saw play left back for Newcastle. That's my opinion. Who'd be close to that? Probably someone like Sylvain Distin, who only played for a year on loan, and then really he was a left centre half, and he went to I think I want to say Everton after he'd
Yeah.
been instead he went there
Stuff.
permanently. I could have gone. Beresford was kind of before my time. Stuart Pearce was before my time. Both great left backs, but I didn't really grow up watching them
Mhm.
and really into that. Ollie Bernard was probably injured too much. Babiora was horrendous. I could go on. Um, and I think, and there is a bit of nostalgia attached to this stuff, right? So, I could go, if I went more recently, do I really want to call out Dan Burn as Newcastle's, best left back in my time watching the club? Probably not. And I think Dan Burn's done a great job for the club, but that's kind of not where I'd go. So I went Jose Enrique. To long story short, we signed him, I think, for around about £6 million, I want to say. That was the summer of 2007, which is when Allardyce came to the club. So it wasn't a fantastic time for Newcastle. And I think the biggest thing I remember about Jose Enrique is that fact he stayed when we got relegated, and he helped get us back promoted. And then he was there for one more year before deciding that he was going to go to Liverpool, which, again, at that time, and he came out and he said, look, Newcastle will never finish in the top six. Again, kind of thing. And that following season, we finished fifth, and Liverpool finished sixth, I think. And there's that great moment when Liverpool come to St James's, we beat them 2-0. Reina gets sent off, and because Reina gets sent off, Jose Enrique has to go and go. But my favourite Jose Enrique memory, as a positive for him, was the goal he scored against Nottingham Forest, which, effectively, it didn't mathematically seal our promotion, but it pretty much effectively showed that we were going to get promoted in 2010. He cuts in on, the edge of the box, and then, shoots into the near side. And it was a goal I was right behind because of where my seat was at the time at St James's. And it was just a magical moment. He had a great chemistry with Gutierrez on the left-hand side as well, and that was a big part of our side at the moment. But a very good player. He is definitely, he's probably not a popular one with the fan base as much now, because he would definitely see himself more as affiliated to Liverpool. But he's a young Spanish lad. Growing up, he probably wasn't a massive Newcastle fan growing up, or had that kind of. We didn't certainly have the same kind of global appeal that Liverpool had as a football club, with the history and the success and what have you. So you can understand some of that, but as a player, as a left back, for me, that would be who I'd pick. Should we go across the back four, or do you want to go right back, Anth?
I'll go right back, if that's okay, with my favourite ever Sunderland player. And I just loved him. Absolutely loved him. Again, it's all sort of, players that we've watched, isn't it, over the years for Sunderland. So it's not necessarily based on, who's the most skillful, who was this, that, and the other. Although I think he was underrated, to be fair, and he had a lot on his locker, and he was tough tackling. I'm going for the tractor, Mr. John Kay. What a player, man. My favourite ever Sunderland player. I just love the fella. Absolutely love him. And I think also in later life, he's doing a similar job to myself. Apparently, he's a very good bloke. I've got a story about John Kay, actually, but I'll have to leave that till another time, because I'm still embarrassed by it, actually, because I left him a voicemail once, but I'll get into that another time. So, John Kay, the tractor, he made 199 appearances between 1987 and 1996. He played for Wimbledon. Prior to that, he played for Arsenal. So, he had some good pedigree. Local lad as such. I think it was Lumley, Great Lumley, he was born. So, yeah, but there's so many moments, and I think one of the most infamous ones is he tackled on Peter Haddock at Leeds United. I was at that game, and he basically, I think he ended his career. And I know Leeds supporters are not overly keen on him because of that tackle, but I don't think there was any malice after that. I think he's been interviewed afterwards and said it hasn't been mentioned very much. So, but also when he got injured against Birmingham in 1993, broke his leg, and instead of writhing on the deck, instead of, oh, woe is me, he got put on the stretcher and did an Hawaii 5-0 and pretended to paddle off the pitch. So there's that as well. But for me, there's the 1990, obviously, the playoff semi-final at St James's Park, the second leg as such, and he was tough tackling. He went in on, I think it was Billy Askew, who he played with because he's a Lumley lad as well. So no holes barred. But another moment, it was bittersweet, was down at Manchester City Main Road. I went to the last game of the season, 1991. 1990-91 season, and we got relegated. But he could play not just as right back, he could play a left back, he could play a centre half, as it was known then. Centre, you know, I think all the titles have changed now in football. But anyway, and he crossed for Gabbiadini to score that wonderful header in off the bar, which you know, could have maybe kept us up, but unfortunately didn't, because we got beat 3-2 that day and got relegated. But just a fantastic play, and a lovely fella off the pitch by all accounts. So my favourite ever Sunderland player, Mr. John Kay, aka the Tractor.
Great, fantastic. I can't add much to that because I've never heard of the guy. But at least I'm honest. At least I'm honest.
You are indeed.
Yeah. Host of a Newcastle Sunderland podcast. Best ever right back. No idea who he is. Okay. I'm gonna talk about my right back, and this is someone that everyone watching and listening will be well aware of. He signed for the club in 2022 in the January. So he's a key signing then. He's obviously a huge part of the England squad. His previous clubs has included Man City, Burnley, Spurs, Atletico Madrid. And he was the first signing of the new era of the PIF, Amanda Staveley consortium, to come in, and that's Kieran Trippier. And what a player he has been for us. And there's a lot of speculation at the moment that he may go this summer. And if he does go, I wish him all the best. But I think what we have to appreciate is, if Kieran Trippier doesn't join Newcastle, does Bruno Guimaraes consider joining Newcastle? Does Sven Botman consider joining Newcastle? Does Alexander Isak consider joining Newcastle? It just set the tone. And it wasn't like the Man City Robinho signing. You were getting someone who, he joined without a relegation release clause at a point when we looked like we were absolutely going to get relegated from the Premier League. And the character he showed, he got injured. He was, traveling with the squad to make sure everything was everyone was on like the right page, and the team were all together, and whatever else. And there's great footage when Tonali signed last summer, and he's at the training ground already, and he's saying, look, I know how difficult it is to go to a new country and settle in, and please, if you need anything, come and see us. We want to make it as easy as possible for you, and everything else. And he just gets it. And there was moments during that derby in January where he was getting so much stick, but he's one of these players who just loves it, and he totally soaks it in. And he was getting a lot of stick about potentially what he was doing in his private life and whatever else, and he was pointing at the scoreboard, which read 3-0 at the time, or 2-0 or whatever. So look, like I think he's got a lot about him. I think he's got a lot of character about him. He's a big reason why not only that we stayed up, but we ended up achieving what we did to qualify for the Champions League. In 22-23 as well. So look, great player, and if he goes, he goes, with his head held high, definitely.
Can't argue with that. Do you know what? He's doing a job for England as well. Mostly out of position, obviously, due to injuries, etc. I know, obviously, Shaw's back now. Will he be playing the full night? Anyway, we're not getting to England, but yeah, he's yeah. We're not getting to England. Who knows what's going to happen tomorrow night? But great player. Got to agree with you there. Great player. So yeah. Central defence then, yeah. So first choice, I've got a really controversial one after this one. But my go-to one is a loan player, twice on loan to us, Mr. Johnny Evans, who, again, another young player who came in and just fitted into the back four seamlessly, and he could bring the ball out of defence. He was good in the air. He didn't panic. He was class, basically, absolutely class. So he first came, I think it was 2006, 2007, was it? Yeah. The back end of that season. But I think he scored one goal, but then he returned in January 2008 on loan. And we stayed up mainly because of, him in defence, as well as some other good players that we had, because there were a few weak links in the squad at that particular moment in time. But just positional awareness, very comfortable on the ball. Obviously, he'd come from Manchester United. He had a good sort of, upbringing there, and football sort of education. And yeah, and look at his career now; he's still going. And Yeah, he was just classy and still well liked by the supporters. So Mr. Johnny Evans, loan player, brilliant.
Yeah, class player. That has to be said. And he did a great job at was Leicester, wasn't it, where he
Mhm.
was for a while just before they got relegated as well, and he'd really kind of established himself in his own right, I think, as a strong Premier League player, and I think it says a lot that he's gone back to Man United, where almost to be squad cover, but actually they've relied on him quite
Mhm.
heavily. Some of that down to injury, but also down to poor form. I think Varane was a little bit out of favour last season at points as well. So the fact that he's still kind of challenging, these players at that level, and I know Man United shit really, but they finished eighth in the league. They won the FA Cup last year. And he was a big part of kind of what they've kind of managed to achieve last season. So yeah, very difficult to argue with. The next player I'm going to go to wasn't actually at Newcastle a massive amount of time, but for me, he's probably the best centre half I've ever seen pull on a black and white shirt. Ex Leeds, went to play on after Newcastle for Real Madrid, and that's Jonathan Woodgate.
Mm.
An absolutely world class player on his day. The problem is he's made of glass, so he's essentially
Mm.
he's out injured a lot of the time now. We can have this conversation. How much of that is actually the player's fault? But probably very little. But when he was fit, it was very hard to beat. We played Marseille at home in the semi-final of the UEFA Cup, as it was at the time. I want to say 2005, 2006. It was around that kind of time. It was the summer before Drogba moved to Chelsea. So it would have been, yeah, so it would have been about April or May 2005. And Woodgate had Drogba in his pocket all night. Drogba didn't have a sniff at all. And you saw the impact Drogba had on the Premier League and what he went on to do, and what a great player he was. Woodgate made him look completely ordinary that night, and that's what Woodgate had in him. He just had this
Mm.
calmness. He just had this technical ability. And then when Real Madrid came in for him, how can you not allow him to go? But also, for 15 million quid or whatever it was at the time, that was probably very, very sensible business given the lack of availability he'd had, to be able to kind of put his mark on the squad. But yeah, probably one of the best players, never really to hit his peak at Newcastle, but he would, in terms of being able to almost have that run of form. But yeah, such an important player for us when he was fit, and yeah, class that. Though he did on his debut for Real Madrid, score an own goal and get sent off.
Yes, he did indeed, didn't he? I was just about to mention that, but yeah, he was a player who was, like you say, unfortunate with injuries, and could have went on and had a really sort of sustainable career, long career, but unfortunately it wasn't to be. But again, well liked by that team. Are they down south, Cornwall way? Borough,
The
is it? Yeah, well liked down there, isn't he? Yeah, I
Whoever
forget the
they are,
name
yeah.
anyway. Yeah, wherever they are. But right, this one's controversial for a central defensive partnership. Controversial, and a lot of the fan base are not going to like it. But I just remember when he was on form and when he played, not for his mercenary behaviour, sort of towards the end of his Sunderland career. Lamine Cornet, I mean, 6-9 appearances, 3 goals. He was a rock at the back. He was a rock. Most famous for the 2 goals against Everton when we beat them 3-0, when Everton down tools basically. And if I was if I was their supporters watching that, I would have been absolutely fuming. But he scored 2 that night, and I wanted to have his babies. He was that good. Honestly, he was fantastic. He was big. He was powerful. Very rarely did anyone get past him. He was just massive, but he had a bit about him as well. He had good feet. So yeah, but what happened was he obviously he there was big transfer fees being bandied around. Everton, funnily enough, were interested in signing him. So I think he basically stated that he wasn't going to play against Southampton. I think that was when Moyes was in charge, and he down tools a bit like Everton that night at Stadium Light when beat them 3-0. So yeah, he sort of sullied his reputation. I mean, he was amongst a bad bunch because we had some horrible mercenary players there. Yeah, I can't even mention them because I'll vomit in my mouth and it'll make us angry. So yeah, but Lamine Kone, on his day, absolutely man mountain. So yeah, but I know it's going to rile a lot of the support base. So apologies for that.
We're trying to pick the best players, and some of and look, I think for those listening and watching, some of those players will be picked because of the memories they provided. Some of them
That's
will
it.
be picked because they're fantastic footballers, and some of them will be picked because they're just like kind of they feel like legends at the club.
Mhm.
Um, the next player I'm going to pick is an Argentine curly-haired sensation. That is
Yeah.
Fabrizio Colocini, signed in the summer of 2008. Christened his first season at the club with a relegation, um, and but he then became club captain soon after that. So and actually was a really important figurehead, but he really he needed that season in the championship, I think. Once he had that season in the championship and he kind of dealt with kind of the physical aspect of the league, or of English football, I suppose, I think that really prepared him then when we got promoted. And from then he really grew. Then obviously when he did get the armband, and I thought he carried it, but he's definitely, he was a quieter player from that point of view. I think he was a very much more captain by leading by example rather than kind of being someone to, you know, necessarily be vocal.
Mhm.
But yeah, again, fantastic player on his day. But he took some time to get there, and then once he did get there, he was very much at his pomp. Some people will be saying to me, "What about Philippe Albert?" Probably before my time, if I'm honest, in terms of me watching the club. Newcastle, aren't famed necessarily for their fantastic defenders over the years. But yeah, I think the likes of Albert and Howie probably before my time, and then if I think post that, um, even recently, I think I find it. Botman's a fantastic footballer, absolutely, but he's been at the club for you know a year and a bit really when I've managed to see him play. Um, there's definitely there are other players that you could potentially argue are technically as good, if not better, but it again, it goes back to kind of what you link with Fabian Schär. I think we came very, very close here. He's having a fantastic Euros, or had a fantastic
Mhm.
Euros tournament. He scored a fantastic penalty against a certain small-armed goalkeeper on on Saturday night. But but for me, I think Colaccini just shaded it in terms of overall ability, but in terms of value, I think Schär would definitely deserve a shout. Right, so you've got your back four, Anth. Where we're going
Right.
next with this formation?
Right then, right midfield, well, right wing. Just as a little comment there, my wife used to cut Colaccini's hair. True story. And he never tipped. But anyway, on to right midfield, right wing. True story. On to right wing, right midfield. We have the chain smoking, menthol smoking French wonder, Stade Malbronk. He can play on the left or right. He makes your defense look shite. Stade Malbronk. I mean, he was class. Didn't score many goals. He scored one. I think he scored one. Obviously, he went to Fulham after us, and he tore it up, and he hit the back of the net on a regular basis. Well, more than one basically. But yeah, signed in 2008 to 2011, 102 appearances, or 112 if you count cup games, whatever. One goal. And yeah, and obviously with regards to when we talk about the sort of games against Newcastle, because we're trying to get our first 11, as playing against Newcastle in a derby match, he provided the cross-come shot for Cisse in the 2-1 win versus your lot, October 2008. There was a particular free kick as well from Kieran Richardson, who my wife also used to cut his hair, and he used to tip. So there you go. Yeah, so Steve Malbronk, I mean, I was amazed when he came from Tottenham to us. He came with Pascal Chimbonda. I forget the other fella, midfielder. Anyway, but I was gobsmacked when he came. But the supporters loved him, and he's a massive cult figure. But he 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 was used a lot of sub because he couldn't last the 90 minutes. I don't know if that was to do with the mental smoking, apparently. But he always put a shift in as well. He covered a lot of grass, and he always put a full sort of, not 90 minutes because he didn't hardly finish 90 minutes, but a full shift in. And yeah, he tracked back. He had skill. He was tricky on the wing, and yeah, stayed Malbronk.
Yeah, and he went on to have a Premier League. Did he not go to Fulham after
Yep.
Sunderland as well? I think.
Hmm.
So he didn't just kind of stop there. So he had some miles in him, didn't he, as a Premier League player? I'm going to go to a player who, and I think this happens with a lot of Newcastle players. Like, we're quite lucky. I think we tend to sell players and they don't really necessarily achieve maybe what you thought they would after they leave. So this is a Frenchman that we signed in the summer of 2011. I think that could apply for a lot of players probably for Newcastle in that era where we were kind of raiding the French leagues. But we signed this one from Lille. He would go on to play for PSG and then Crystal Palace, and that is Johan Cabaye. A really special talent, and I think when he started playing that preseason, it was interesting because it was around when Joey Barton was throwing spitting his dummy out basically because I think Ashley was doing everything he could to force him out. So Cabaye was taking corners and free kicks, and like Barton's just kicking off about it, and like there's a reason he was taking those free kicks and corners because he was a class player. Fantastic from a set piece. He scored
Hmm.
one of my favourite goals was the third goal against Man United, the free kick, which went in under the side of the bar at the Gallagher end. But he was just a fantastic footballer. Great passing game, good attacking mind. He scored another great goal against Man United at Old Trafford when it's the last time we beat them in 2014. We're wearing this yellow and blue kind of Brazil-esque kit, and the ball gets cut back, I think, from Sissoko, and Cabaye puts it right in the far post. And that January, actually, he had such a kind of purple patch, and then he was sold to PSG. And the director of football at the time, Joe Kinnear, God rest his soul, got sacked because he didn't sell him for enough. And I think 19 million at the time for Cabaye probably was selling him a little cheaper than I think some of us would have expected. But he, of course, for other reasons, doesn't go necessarily into the popularity scale at Newcastle because at the start of the season, he was linked with a move to Arsenal and he refused to play
Hmm.
in the first game. And he came off the bench for the second game. And I think again, it goes back to the kind of club we are, and I know this has become a recurring theme with any player from that era. But if you think about kind of what was going on in the politics and the boardroom and what was happening with these players, and look, and what the fans were being told, this is a club at the time that were proven in court to be lying to their fans to mislead them, and that's
Hmm.
pretty much the quote from the Kevin Keegan court case. So you just don't know kind of what's happening with these players, what they're kind of being told, what they're being promised. And I think a lot of the time they're being promised to come in, if you play well, then you'll be able to get a move to a bigger club in, a year, 2 years time. There'll be a big club that comes in for you. So when Arsenal come in and say they want to come and sign you, then why wouldn't you be interested in that happening if that's what you've been sold? But I think Cabaye was a really good footballer for us. And in those circumstances, do I massively blame him for leaving? No, I don't. It was PSG at a time when I think
Hmm.
Qatar had just bought them like a year or so earlier, and it was a great opportunity for him, and it didn't work out, and that's why he ended up back at Crystal Palace. But then by then, I think we'd seen the best of him.
Great player. Again, a great player. Silky, wasn't he? Very silky. And yeah, but not as good as this player that I'm going to mention next. Anyway, because you've got to have a bit of silk and steel, haven't you? So I'm going a little way back, but again, this fella played in a derby game and nearly scored one of the most infamous own goals against your lot. Unfortunately, it didn't go in. Absolutely hard as nails, Kevin Ball. Kevin Ball, man. I mean, when he came to us from Pompey, I mean, we signed him for tuppence. I remember because we obviously in the old first division, and he was a central defender. He started off as a central defender, and then he obviously got moved into midfield. But Mr. Sunderland, I suppose. I think it was 340 appearances. Again, I think these are just league appearances and 21 goals. And, you know, he scored some good goals, actually. He scored a fantastic goal, a diving header against Chelsea at Roker Park. And I mean, he's done a lot for us as well. I mean, he was caretaker manager, he was professional development coach, he was club ambassador. Left in 2022, and I'm still upset at the way he left or the way he was treated by the club, because I don't know what happened behind the scenes. I know, you know, there's a lot of moving parts, and I know a lot changes at a football club when new owners come in, or, you know, even a new manager to a certain extent. But I thought it was a shame that he did leave, or was he asked to leave? Was he pushed? I don't know, but he was just, he was just brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And I know that Mr. Vinnie Jones went on record to say he was one of the, or if not, he's the hardest player he played against, because I think at one stage when we played Wimbledon at Roker Park, they were making, I don't know if it was Michael Bridges' life a misery, and Kevin Ball basically offered all the crazy gang out. So yeah, and I think the arses dropped out, and even Vinnie Jones was like, "Hold on a second, do you know what I mean?" But he was just fantastic. And again, another player who is well thought of in the area and did a lot off the pitch, and some of his talkings are absolutely hilarious. And his passion for the area, he got the area straight away, which I think is a big thing. Um, Players coming from overseas, you know, it's a big thing to ask them to adjust. But you know, he'd come from down Portsmouth at the time, which was probably, you know, coming up, maybe probably like, what the hell's this? But he just got it straight away. Supporters loved him. Blood and thunder, 100% effort, hard as nails. Kevin Ball.
Yeah, my barber cut his hair, and or what's left of it, I
Ah,
suppose. Anyway, and but he says that he hasn't got a bad word to say about Kevin Ball. Kevin, give it to me to the end of the season. Ball, is, I think he's also known in Sunderland circles. But no, yeah, obviously club, and I think again goes back to it, isn't it? You know, like actually when someone gets the club, that really matters, especially when they're not from the area. I think we definitely felt that
yep.
with our manager recently when he's come in.
Mm-hmm.
He's just understood it, and that means a lot. Now, talking about a player who has come in and just gets it and understands it, we signed him again. It's another January 2022 signing that I'm going for, and it's Bruno Guimaraes. And what a footballer this guy is! He currently has, well, it's expired, but he had £100 million release clause hanging over his head in his most recent contract. But that's how highly Newcastle value him. At least 100 million, I would think, now that that's expired. He's been transformational for our football club. We've not won a game without Bruno Guimaraes in the starting lineup since he joined the club. That's
Wow.
how important he has been to our success. We've not won a game if he's not played, and when he scores, we win. So that's the kind of influence that that he's had as a player. I think what I really like about him is that he's hard as nails as well as having that flair. He's not just, you know, I think you talk about Brazilian silky footballer and and what have you, and straight away there's an image in your head of, you know, players falling over when, you know, there's a feather that brushes past them or what have you. Um, and Bruno's not that at all. Like Bruno will throw himself. Basically, the game's dying out. You're a goal ahead, and he will throw himself in the way of a player to win the foul to slow the game down. You know, he's that kind of player.
Mm.
He'll make a big tackle and then he'll G the crowd up because he's just gone through someone to get the energy back up. And he's got that thing about him. But I think the thing that's most impressive about him most recently, Anth, is discipline. So he was on 9 bookings from, felt like forever, in the Premier League. And if he got that 10th booking, he was going to be suspended for 2 games. Now, Eddie Howe's made a comment about this and said in the press conference, he said, "Oh, he turned around to us and he'd said, oh, I promise, but Gaffer, I'm not going to get booked a 10th time." And Eddie Howe's thinking, I think, whatever.
Mm.
And he didn't. And he actually became a better player and was more disciplined as a result. So
Mm.
to have that kind of quality, I think there's a reason why he's starting for Brazil in the Copa America at the minute. And he is my choice. Now we are we have not got all the way through our 11s. So we are, I think, if I look at this, we're about 7 players in on either side. But we are going to call it a day there, and we are going to do a follow-up episode to follow the rest of Ant's midfield and my attacking four of the back of my formation. Anth, again, thank you very much for joining us to have this chat. Everybody, thank you so much for listening. Again, need to let you know that Mama Lane Crafts will offer a 10% discount on your first order when you order through their Facebook page or their Instagram, which will be on the links below. And they're also running some competitions too. If you've liked the video, please like it. If you've enjoyed what you've listened to on your free podcasting app, please rate us and please leave us comments for feedback. And we'll be back with an episode next week. Thank you very much and goodbye.